And you're listening to another episode of Around Comics, the comic book podcast, where we talk about everything in and around the world of comics. I'm one of your hosts, Brian Salazar, and with me, as always, is the co-host of the show, my partner in crime, the yin to my yang, Christopher Niesman.
Have we actually committed any crimes?
I'm sure we have.
We've been saying partner in crime for 15 years. Have there been
definitely
crimes committed?
It's like a common law marriage now.
It is. It really is.
Partner.
I'm sure we've probably, I don't know crimes, but definitely light
crimes
assault.
against humanity.
Misdemeanors.
Yeah. Definitely crimes against humanity. Well, our other partner in crime, the bearded one, Mr. Tom Caters, is here. Tom, how you doing, sir?
I'm good. I'm tired.
Feeling old and busted?
Old and busted, Prez. I used to be a teenager back in the day.
Many years ago.
It doesn't feel that long ago, but then you're just like, oh yeah, it's a long time ago. I saw something. It's like the 30th anniversary of something. No, we were watching the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductions, and
that's how you know you're old. That's how you know you're old. So you're watching.
It's like, oh, 9 Inch Nails is. Everything looks old.
If
you know what I
Jeff Foxworthy bit. If you find yourself watching the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, you are old.
You know how I realized the other day I was old because I was like, oh, I could really go for a nice Kevin Costner movie. Oh, I'm old. That's it. I'm old.
That's it. Nice, relaxing.
Is Kevin Costner the new Jimmy Stewart?
I don't know about that. Maybe.
You know what I could go for? Tin Cup. He's in that.
Good. No, he's got a new movie out, and it's like him and Diane Lang, and I'm like, oh, they play like grandparents, and I'm just I can watch that. Yeah, I can watch that, and then I'm just like, wow, I'm fucking old now. That's great, just fucking great.
Honey, come sit down. We're watching the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony.
Well, kids,
look at
everyone. Get everyone on stage at the same time.
Here's the problem with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductions: they're running out of rock stars from the 60s and 70s, and now they're putting in like R&B singers and rappers.
Yeah.
It was the Biggie went in. The Biggie, that guy,
Biggie Smalls.
Yeah. Biggie Smalls went in, we're at the point. It's like, Iggy Pop is inducting people, and yeah, it's like Radiohead is in the Hall of Fame now, and I'm just like,
really?
Oh yeah, Radiohead went in like 3 years ago, dude.
Yeah, just forget it. It's done.
Yeah,
I mean, not that a Hall of Fame, any Hall of Fame.
I went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame once, and
it's amazing.
They had
awesome.
Bruce Springsteen exhibit. And they just had like a bunch of different flannel shirts. Like
bandanas.
A lot of bandanas.
I was sort of like, I can kind of, maybe if this was David Bowie, I'd be like, oh, look at all these. But it's that, when the Bowie exhibit was at the Museum of Contemporary Art, they did have like a bunch of different outfits inside.
Oh,
glass cases.
David
I think
Bowie
for Springsteen, I think Springsteen maybe isn't the greatest wardrobe. Like the outfits through the years.
Did he never have a Japanese like fashion designer outfitting the E Street Band?
Just all kinds of different jeans. Jeans and flannel shirts.
Bandanas. A lot of bandanas. So
Kurt Cobain's flannel.
So before we go on much farther, and I do want to go back to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but we're joined by a comics royalty. I would say.
Oh, Jesus
Christ!
One of the preeminent comic scholars in the world, and just a really good old friend of ours. Going back, what did we track back? Is it 15 years now?
Yeah, 05.
Whew. We old. Zach Crucy, how you doing, bud?
I'm great, man. It's nice to see all your faces.
Absolutely.
It's been a very long time.
Too. Happy COVID.
Yeah.
Merry COVID, everyone. We can say Merry COVID now.
Oh, good. Thank you. Finally.
Thank God, finally.
The war on COVID is over.
Yeah.
So people out there who may not know who Zach is, shame on you. But Zach is a first of all, longtime comic book fan. You were marketing manager at DCB Service for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You ran the Summit City Comic-Con?
Summit City, and then it was Appleseed because Summit City was not a good name.
Okay, yeah. So you were a convention organizer, and you are absolutely a comic book scholar. What are your credentials now? And you've got lots of letters.
I'm a doctor. So
Dr. Crucy.
Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah.
Like Dr.
Yeah. There's enough comic book doctors where I feel like I fit right in. Right?
But yeah, so you're a bad guy.
Well, I mean, unless you're Doctor Strange.
There's one.
He's good.
Dr. Fate.
There's one.
And he's
and Dr. Fate.
Middlin.
Yeah.
You don't know with him. Most of the doctors are bad.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, most of the doctors are bad, but I feel like I fit in that sort of like weird like anti-doctor, like the weird like anti-hero doctor space, right? Foot in both worlds. I'm a man of convenience, right? That's where my loyalties lie.
That's how I've always felt of you. So
yeah, it's true.
So, guys, one of the reasons we wanted to have Zach on this week is, I mean, it's no secret if you know Zach that he is a Steve Ditko devotee. I mean, you are, I don't want to say like obsessed with Ditko, but he has certainly taken up a lot of mental space in your life, and also your pursuit of graphic and comic art studies. We've been reading the Rorschach series that Tom King is writing, and I'm reading the second issue.
Did you say Rorschach?
Rorschach.
He did.
Rorschach.
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 That would be a comic I'd like.
Like a
Rorschach.
Like a
It's like
zoo crew, like a Watchmen zoo crew.
Oh,
yeah.
Rorschach for the Watchmen.
Rorschach.
All right. Yeah. Okay, I'm a bourbon.
Octomandius.
Oh yeah, okay.
So are we going to get into like all sorts of Sharknado versions of Watchmen characters, which I think would actually be entertaining? But have you read the last issue of Rorschach?
Yeah, I read it today.
Because I texted you and said we need to have you on the show to talk about this.
Talk about Rorschach.
That's exactly right.
Get on this show.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah,
that's okay. I bullied Chris into reading Prez so we could actually talk about it tonight.
Oh,
I had to catch up. I read 6 issues of Prez today.
Catch up,
Dr. Mano Warhatton. You could be like
we put off the Batman trade for a month, and I say I may not be ready, and they're like, "What is wrong with you?"
I didn't say anything.
You did not say anything. He bullied me.
Yeah, well, I think the world would be a little bit better if maybe some people got bullied every once in a while.
Yeah. Bullying gets shit
as
done.
an old and busted Prez would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Starting to sound like James Mason in Bigger Than Life, like taking cortisone shots.
Silkworm.
Yeah. Shit. All right, you got that one.
So Rorschach number 2 is and they definitely went into it with the first issue. And I want to talk to Tom about it. We need to have Tom back on the show.
Clownfish?
Huh?
Clownfish?
Stop.
Sorry, all I'm thinking about now is animal versions of Watchmen.
Yeah. The Owlman's already. That's like a gimme.
Yeah, he's already.
Yeah. Okay, we're done now. That's it.
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry, Chris.
We've got a preeminent mind the world of comics here. You guys are cracking wise. Come on.
Sorry, Dr. Prez. I apologize.
Dr. Zach.
Thank you.
No, I'm just thinking of like, Dr. Manhattan animal analogies right now. But no, it's Tom definitely led in with the first issue that this character is definitely a Ditko analog. So Zach, reading the second issue and with the research that you've done into Ditko and kind of knowing that, I mean, what was your take on this issue of this character who's obviously a Steve Ditko, analog?
I mean, it is what it is. I liked it. I think one thing that I had to remind myself right away is this reminded me in some ways of like remember way back when Jeff Parker and Tom Fowler did a Mysterious the Unfathomable, and they had that James Randi analog in there. And like I'm a guy who, I am and was a big James Randi fan. So like when I saw that, I was like, okay, dial it back. Just remember that this is a fictional take on a person that you admire. So, and the same thing is true in this.
You want to know. I think it's probably okay to say it at this point. Do you want to know what the Mysterious the Unfathomable miniseries originally was?
What?
That was Parker and Fowler's Doctor Strange pitch.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. I would have totally bought that.
Yeah.
That would have been exciting.
Yeah,
I like it.
That was originally a Doctor Strange pitch. So I assume they don't care that that getting out there, but that's Tom told that 10 years ago or whatever it was.
That would have been a terrific. That would have been a terrific Doctor Strange.
Yeah, that's what it started.
But anyway, so I mean, that's one of the things that you got to kind of remind yourself of with these things. I mean, he is taking creative license and liberties with stuff, and there are some things in there where, like, I get it, but like, how do I want to say this? Like, there are things that are sort of said about Ditko that are widely believed and widely accepted that aren't necessarily true. So like the reclusiveness, like the Salinger-esque type stuff that's ascribed to him, like just because someone doesn't want to like talk to you personally doesn't mean that they are like in hiding. And so there's things like that they don't really bother me, but like it's like, okay, like I see what's happening here. This is the myth that is being sort of do
you think the Jonathan Ross In Search Of series kind of like piled on to that whole myth of it?
Well, I mean, in some ways, I mean that documentary is interesting and there's a lot of good stuff in there, but there's also a lot of things that are just flat out untrue. Like Neil Gaiman tells the story in that about the Green Goblin, and like he repeats the story that one of the reasons Steve left Spider-Man is because he and Stan got in an argument about who the Green Goblin should be, and that's not true. Steve had always planned on Norman Osborn to be the Goblin and planted clues about it like well before that issue, that the Romita issue, right? So that was like the long-term plotting that he had done, but that's part of like those are part of like the myths that got spread and are just basically swallowed by people because they're so pervasive. So like when I see stuff like what happened in this Rorschach issue or these Rorschach issues, I mean, it's fine by me because I'm an adult and can just read comics and enjoy them. But
how dare you?
But then,
how dare you, sir?
I know. What a coward. Really, I should just
choose a side.
Be on you.
Choose a
tearing
side.
These things apart. Yeah. But so there's stuff in there that that's not really accurate to who Steve was as a person, and I'm not just basing that on like my suppositions, but like talking to family and that sort of thing. So so there's things like that. But in that second issue, when they do the sort of the mock Mr. A question comic or whatever, that was interesting. That was really interesting because as I read it, like it's a philosophy comic like Ditko did, and that like the incoherent, like how incoherent it is, I think is something that I think Tom is very obviously doing on purpose. But I don't think Ditko's philosophy was ever that incoherent. I don't, it's not my philosophy. I don't agree with it, but I don't think he was ever as incoherent as all of that. But there are things in there that he teases out that I think are really sharp and like really smart. Like this this character, this analog for Ditko, like his interest in obsession with sort of internality and like every conflict being about a conflict inside of yourself, and that conversations happen within you, and that all of that kind of stuff. I mean, that's exactly Ditko. That's perfect as far as I'm concerned. It's squeezed into this other sort of incoherent kind of babbling that happens in that comic, but that is very Ditko-y. And the other thing that I think that he gets really right that I really appreciated was, Ditko never stopped doing superhero comics. He never lost an interest in superhero comics ever. I mean, he did them up until his death. So that's one of those things people assume that he just stopped doing things with superpowers. That was never true. But shifting his interest to things that he thought would make an impact and make a difference, because he believed that ideas made a difference, and that having your own philosophy and your own view on the world and sticking to it, right, wrong, or indifferent, would make a difference for not just himself but other people. That sort of comes through in these Rorschach issues rung true to me in a really pleasant way. So there's a lot to like about it. It's really interesting. The way that they're playing with all of that stuff. The only to me, as someone that's spent better part of a lifetime reading these things, the only sort of drawback is like he's not a recluse. Can we just stop calling him a recluse? Can we stop?
He lived in Manhattan.
His office was in Times Square.
Yeah, if you're a recluse, you don't live in Manhattan.
And keep your keep your phone number in the phone book.
Yeah,
and take visitors.
But to be fair to Tom as well, is he's not writing a Steve Ditko story. He's not writing a Steve Ditko biography. He's not.
Exactly.
He's not. He's sort of taking the mythos and he's playing with. I mean, you got to remember also too, like he's working in the world of Watchmen, which is taking a mythos and deconstructing it and retelling stories about that mythos using icons from the mythos.
Is that kind of the brilliance of it? Is that he's actually going pre-Moore and going back to the actual source?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily the brilliance of it. I think it's cool that he's sort of linking obviously Rorschach to Mr. A and sure, to the Question and to Ditko and those, and it was obviously that was where Rorschach came from originally. Mm-hmm. But what I like is that he's that he's playing with I don't know. I'm not a Steve Ditko historian. I don't know honestly that much about Steve Ditko. I was never a huge fan of his work. And I've never spent a whole lot of time really studying his story. I probably am exactly the person that you would despise when it comes to knowing anything about Ditko, because the only thing I know about him is sort of the mythos, the little bit of, what I mean? And obviously, creating Spider-Man and Doctor Strange but it's very surface level, my knowledge and interest in Steve Ditko, to be honest. But even Sounds so, cool. Like in one issue of Rorschach, I knew who he was talking about because I know of Watchmen and I know the history of Watchmen and the history of Rorschach and those characters. So I think it's interesting that he's playing, whether it's true to life, true to Steve Ditko or not, he's playing with the mythos in that way of what maybe people think. And we also have to understand it's 2 issues. And so far, the only actual information we have about this character is through the eyes of someone investigating his death. Yeah. So we don't know, so once again, is what we're learning through these issues so far the actual truth of this character, which I don't think it is. I think we're going to find out something else. Or is it what everyone thought this character is? And by the end of the story, I wouldn't be surprised if it's more along the lines of, this is what people think of Steve Ditko, but this is the actual, maybe more of a reality of Steve Ditko. And that's what he's sort of playing with, is our preconceived notions of Steve Ditko as
I
comic book.
think it's really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it's not like what you're saying. Like, I mean, I don't despise people like that. That just makes you a normal person, right? Like, and I agree. Like, I don't think that it needs to be a 1-to-1, and I think it would be silly if it were a 1-to-1. Like, why would you do that, right? Like, there should be artistic license. There should be, some sort of change here, speaking to the mythology. That all makes sense to me. I guess like why I draw attention to like that, some of those things, is because in some ways, for someone like Ditko, and certainly for someone like Kirby, but not so much with Kirby, but with Ditko for sure, a lot of those myths, because they're so pervasive, and because that's the sort of like the discourse and the language that we use to understand, that so many people use to understand him, in a lot of ways, that's disenfranchised him as a creative force in a lot of these early stories, right? And so that's what sort of gives me pause. Like, I mean, like I said, I mean, really, I don't care, right? It's a comic book. It's art. It should be enjoyed. But those myths, I mean, they do damage over time. I mean, and shape the way that people think and sort of talk about a particular person. And a person that frankly never, and I don't really want to get into this whole discussion, but like, it was never really compensated for like what he did as the creative force on Spider-Man and the creative force on Doctor Strange. He just wasn't. So like when those myths get sort of re-ingrained, like it's just another person you have to like remind, like, okay, but like, yes, he has some problematic views. Yes, I'm not asking you to like or agree with his approach. It's just like, maybe tone down the stuff like where you call him a maniac, right? Like maybe tone down the stuff like where you call him a crazy person, because he's not. He's a person, right? So that's where it gets fuzzy for me.
It's such a comic book fan, and I think just like it goes hand in hand with sort of loving things that aren't ours, whether it's comic books or movies or characters, and it's like, but especially comic books, there's this thing about like defending the injustice that so many of these creators and characters, you know what I mean? Like we always find ourselves sort of wanting to defend them, whether it's, I mean, if you just look at Watchmen, it's like myself, I've literally found myself like in arguments about like the Watchmen TV show or the Watchmen movie, or, it's like, or people calling it a graphic novel. And it's like, well, it's 12 comic book issues.
It's a limited series.
Yeah. But it's like, it's that same thing of like letting that that misinformation exist is sort of some sort of weird affront to my sensibilities. So I know what you mean. Like, it's an interesting thing. Knowing Tom King, I'd be surprised if, at the end of it, that he, I can't imagine he's doing this in any way to try and disrespect or not, pay homage to.
I don't think he would do that in issue 2. I think you kind of
right. That's what I mean.
Nailed it. It's like, this is the setup for what is going to be revealed later. And once again, it's being told through the eyes of the investigator, not.
An anonymous Facebook user said Zach must despise more people. There's no choice.
I'm working on it.
You have to.
I will hate you.
Tell me what you know about Steve Ditko, and I'll tell you how much I hate you.
That's right. Your worth is based on how many issues of Mr. A you've read. How many Kickstarters have you backed, sir?
So, Zach, how did your I don't know if it's right to call it a fascination or your interest in Ditko, how did that come about? And obviously we haven't even talked about your own projects in regards to Steve Ditko, but how did your interest in him as a creator come about?
When I was a little kid, when Well, I mean, we're all old men. We understand these things. Remember when they used to do those Marvel Masterworks single issue comics, right? They were like the loss leader, like the precursor thing to get people to go and spend, you know, $50 or $75 on a master work edition. So when I got those, when I got the first issue of Spider-Man and then Amazing Fantasy 15, you know, at the time, I guess I was maybe 4th grade, 5th grade, thereabouts. And, you know, for me, Spider-Man up to that point had been Todd McFarlane and, you know, Romita Jr. and whatever, Ross Andrew, whatever I was getting out of the bins at the flea market. But when I saw those Ditko issues and I read those for the first time, like, it was totally different. It didn't look like anything I had ever read before. And it was weird and alien in the way that he moved and behaved. And Peter Parker was not pretty. And
the fingers, man,
the character. Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff going on with hands. And, you know, I'm a child, so I don't really understand what's going on, but I knew that it was different. And really different. And after that he was like one of the first creators, like older sort of Silver Age creators where I made a point to learn his name. And then finding him around the same time, like in reading Speedball and stuff like that he was doing for Marvel at the time, got me, you know, hooked. I have, you know, I still have my first 10 issues or whatever of Speedball from when I was a kid. So that was it. And then later on, you know, then I started reading more Doctor Strange, and then really was just sort of stuck on those characters until I had a little more disposable income and access to things. And then I started reading, you know, the DC stuff like Creeper and Hawk and Dove and and so on and so forth. And I never read the Charlton stuff until I was in college, or out of college almost. So like my early 20s, I guess.
Yeah.
Then I found the Charlton stuff and found the horror stuff, which is what I think is the best and most interesting.
Really?
I think, oh yeah, I think his stuff at Warren with Archie Goodwin, and then the Charlton horror stuff. I mean, he was doing horror books at Charlton from like almost nonstop from like 1953 until 1985 or 86, whenever Charlton folded. Right? I mean, there's a couple of gaps in there, but nothing meaningful in terms of time. But those horror books that he did with stuff, a lot of stuff he was writing or plotting himself, and then stories with Joe Gale and a few other people, but like just really, really like top-notch stuff, like really experimental and weird and strange, and it's exciting for me to look at now and read and think about. Like the cover for my book is a cover that he did for Out of This World, because those stories are they're just bananas, because he could do anything, because Charlton really cared so long as you adhered to the code.
Sure. And it was Ditko. So
yeah, and he was going to do what he wanted to do anyway.
Yeah, knock yourself out.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of, you wrote a book.
I did write a book.
You made a book.
I did. I wrote a 300-something page or a 280-something page book about Steve Ditko, or about his comics anyway. So yeah, I wrote a book called Mysterious Travelers that comes out in February from the University Press of Mississippi. It is about Ditko's philosophy and sort of where it fits in sort of the fabric of American political thought, which is not to say that Ditko's comics, you know, made like significant inroads into the way that people really thought and behaved. They didn't, but at least not in the immediate term. But his ideas fit within this really sort of strange and weird, complicated network of ideas that is born out of neoliberalism, you know, sort of a revised version of capitalism after World War II.
Sure.
And the New Thought movement. So, and a lot of the stuff, like a lot of his interest in objectivism, and objectivism itself is sort of implicated in these ideas. And there's a lot happening there. So one of the ways you might think about it is, say, someone like Joel Osteen, right? His prosperity gospel nutty stuff. There's this imagination that if you will something, right? If you think hard enough, if you concentrate hard enough, and if you concentrate your positive energy on these things, then you can sort of will yourself sort of capitalistic pleasures, what be they goods, homes, a better job, whatever. That's like a contemporary version of this. But in the 40s and 50s, people like Norman Vincent Peale with The Power of Positive Thinking, and Dale Carnegie with How to Win Friends and Influence People. I mean, this is exactly what they're doing. It is new age mind power mysticism with a capitalistic twist on it. So that's really where Ditko's work seems to fit in. Like, he's not advocating these things directly, but his sort of interest in internality and exploring yourself and who you are and diving into yourself, literally in the case of Doctor Strange, literally diving into yourself and fighting your own demons, contribute to that sort of discourse and those ideas. So that's more or less what the book is about. Like, it's taking those ideas and sort of putting them in a useful context and considering selections of his body of work from 53 to 86. And then I include a few things about, more recent publications, but it's really, I stop it at 86 because that's when, because that's leading into Watchmen. Right. And Watchmen is based on Ditko comics. I mean, it is a response, Alan Moore's response to Ditko.
Wow.
Okay. Have you have any of you guys seen the documentary series on, I think it's HBO, The Vow? It's about the cult Nexium cult.
I watched one episode, but I found it. This is a whole other topic. I find a lot of these documentary series are so stretched out that I kind of get a little bored.
It is. I'm always fascinated by cults, and the Nexium is, it's the next version of what you're talking about to some degree. And one of the things about that documentary in particular is, like, a lot of the people involved in it, it's really kind of sad because they were all they're all like good people. Like, they all thought they were trying to do good things for the world. And they were, and my thought was always like, I'm always fascinated by it because I'm like, how is anyone caught up in this stuff? Like, how do you get fooled into believing this stuff and believing in a cult and that kind of thing? And
it's the same thing with like the People's Temple and Jim Jones. All those people thought that they were creating like a utopia, right? And they were creating like a racially just, society,
It occurred to me watching it was like, well, it's because of that, because like good, kind-hearted people are self-reflective and they're insecure about their own place in the world and and what they're meant to do, and it's like psychotic sort of mean-spirited people don't necessarily have that self-reflection. You know what I mean? Sociopaths don't have self-reflection, where it's these con men sort of prey on those insecurities of like, well, this is how you make yourself better. This is how you know what I mean? And Nexium goes into this guy had this entire program about like how to get rid of all your doubts and insecurities and the same sort of, the gift and all these things where it's like, creating a better self and creating all the, I don't want to go, but it's just interesting where like, to me, it's always about sort of like, kind people that are insecure, and that fascinates me to some degree when it comes to this kind of thing. I don't know how that.
You have to be.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, cult-like thinking is certainly part and parcel of all that stuff, right? I mean, there's a lot to be said about that. But also,
not to suggest that Ditko was involved in any kind of cult or anything like that. No. Just those same sort of things, whether it's Dale Carnegie.
It was a cultish way of thinking. I mean, he was certainly about ideologies.
Yeah, but he also believed that everyone should have their own philosophy and ideology, right? Like, he didn't think that anyone should claim the philosophy of any other person as their own, that they should take the time to reflect and create their own view of the world and then live that.
Also black and white and right and wrong.
Yeah, and that gets a little fuzzier on that too than I think he might get credit for with the Mr. A stuff.
It was pretty straightforward with the Mr. A stuff.
I really don't think so.
The black and white card is that there's black and white and there is no gray.
Yeah, there are choices, right? But like if you like read his letters and the ways that he talks to people about that stuff, like he notes that human beings are on a continuum, right? And as I sort of read it and think through it, like when you see like those black and white cards, when Mr. A shows up, like first of all, like there's good reason to think that neither Mr. A nor the questioner actually exist. They are ideas. And when either Mr. A or the question hands you that card and it does what it's going to do, that is the recipient of that card is facing an idea, is facing a choice on what they must do in that moment. Right. And then that choice in that moment has that sort of binary problem. But that person making the choice exists on a continuum of potential.
So
right?
it's black and white choices.
So I mean,
not
so
black and white existence.
Yeah, he thinks it's more in his way of. I think you could make a good case that in his way of imagining the world is that he believes in a sort of contextual absolutism, right? So like in a given moment, you have a choice and you must make a choice in that moment. But like if you read the later Mr. A stories, like he spends a lot of time like thinking through like what it is to be afraid and how fear makes people make the choices that Mr. A would imagine to be the evil choice. And why people do those things or there's another story that I talk about this in the book where it's clearly about sexual violence, trauma from violence, or relationship violence, and the sort of the residuals from that trauma and violence leading to ostensibly bad choices. But the comic takes a view that yes, this person made a bad choice, but there's a context here for those things. So I think it's a little fuzzier than he gets credit for, like on superficial readings of the work. I mean, it's much more. He's really worried about a lot of these things, and I think worried is a fair word to use. I mean, they concern him. I think that at some level he imagined that by putting these ideas down or working out his philosophy, that he's providing a conversation piece for someone else to read this and debate it and argue it and then do what they will with it. But so like another example like that he gets crap for, and not unjustifiably so. I totally understand where this comes from. Is with violence, right, and killing criminals. Like when he talks about violence, like in his essays and in comics, like he's not talking about real violence. And there's like this persistent notion that if Mr. A kills people, that Ditko really thinks that vigilantes should be running around just murdering muggers. Mm-hmm. He doesn't think that at all, right? I mean, again, this is a thought experiment. These are allegorical figures who operate in this sort of mindscape of places and things and ideas, and that individuals respond to. So it's not just that. Like there might be instances where choices are black and white, but he doesn't think that people are black and white. I think he thinks people are much more complicated than that.
Well, I think a lot of times, I mean, once again, complex ideas and he was obviously a pretty complex person. Oftentimes people choose to just simplify it for their own benefit of, either not wanting to delve into it deeply enough or just unable to sort of comprehend it or whatever it may be. And I think that's part of the mythos with him too. It's sort of, it's continued to propagate, that
in my limited experience with Mr. A comics, the thing I liked about the Unthinker comic in the Rorschach book is that it has that vibe of when I've experienced Mr. A comics and I'm like, are you sure you want to be telling me this in a comic? As opposed to there's like, there's times where it's like the tension of like, you're trying to explain something to me and like, I kind of get it, but I don't know if the way you're doing it is working for me, or it's got that sense of like times where like these characters are saying something, or there's like a a long explanation of this, and it's like I get it, but there's like a weird tension because it's like is a comic? I mean, a comic can do whatever it wants. I mean, obviously, whoever makes it can make a comic do whatever it wants. But there's always, to me, that weird tension of like, is this like the best way to explain this to me?
Well, it may just be the best way he knew how to.
Yeah, it's like, exactly. But there's like a weird, like a little, like, you know, I'd have to dig up whatever Mr. A comics I've ever read, but there's always that tension there of like this is, you know, you're trying to explain something to me that I think I kind of get. It's very, and it's complex, but this way of telling it doesn't always lend itself to complexity all the time, and more words doesn't always make it easier to understand. You know, like there's like a weird always been a weird tension for me with that.
I tend to agree. Like there are I think there are some ways of reading it where you're like it comes through really clearly, and then there are other times where like, you know, man, like the image did a lot to help me understand this, right? Yeah. And I think that you and Sal are right too, that like readers of comics are trained to strip down these things, or strip these things down and then pull the complexity from other hints and clues, not to sort of, we're not reading an essay in, you know, Philosophy Now or some critical theory book or something like that. I mean, it's, you know, it's the medium and the message sort of don't always work together in that way. So I think
and sometimes it's cool because it doesn't always work together. And then sometimes you're like, huh.
Yeah. Well,
you're like, okay, this is the tension isn't working right now. And it's fun.
Yeah. And I think that there are some stories where I think it works really brilliantly. Like I think in the Doctor Strange stuff, it's beautifully done. Because I mean, and he is writing those. And it's so much of it is just given to the art. Like all the stuff you figure out with Doctor Strange, where he's plunging into all of these sort of cavernous internal spaces when he goes into the dark dimension and he faces the demons of his own mind and finds out that he can't beat them, that he's locked in a constant battle to negotiate with Dormammu to just keep the fascism away. That's fascinating. Or the mindless ones, just like the image of the mindless ones, that they are of the horde that threatens to destroy the mind, the horde that threatens to destroy the individual, like to lose control, to lose yourself. And that the barrier between losing total control and you is this horrible fascist monster, this authoritarian dictatorial monster. And now what do you do with that? Right? Like, and how do you sort of negotiate that space to sort of keep both of those things at bay and allow yourself to live a more liberal, magnanimous life? I mean, that to me comes through really terrifically in the art and not at all through the dialogue.
Yeah.
But then when you read later stuff like Static, where something very similar is happening, like really strikingly similar, you know, the over explaining gets in the way. Like you can suss these things out, you can learn these things. But I think that he doesn't want to be. At times there's an anxiety about being misunderstood, and that anxiety sort of comes out by just adding words. Like if you read his essays, like he does this thing like almost like H.P. Lovecraft, where he'll like run a string of adjectives together. So there's no way you can misunderstand this, right? Like,
you have no doubt what he means.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Lovecraft, and I have a question for you, Zach. You had mentioned earlier about his horror work and how you think that's maybe his best work. You know, H.P. Lovecraft obviously has come under fire of late a lot because, but you know, one of the things that I always sort of look at any horror story is, you know, if you look at any kind of horror work, it's based on fears, and whether they're illogical fears, which most times they are, but I mean, whether it's Dracula, whether it's Frankenstein, whether, you know, it's H.P. Lovecraft, whether it's, you know, Get Out, you know, more recently, that kind of stuff. It's about fear. I mean, that's where horror stories come from and they originate from. And if Lovecraft didn't have his illogical fears of immigration and of obviously racism and the things that he was afraid of, he never would have created these stories. And while I appreciate the fact that I don't necessarily, I don't agree with his understanding of human beings and the how he wanted to treat the world, his fear is still something that obviously is universal and that anyone can feel, and and it created those stories nonetheless. And I think that's sometimes what we sort of miss when we confuse the artist and the art. It's like with Ditko, he has all these challenging things that he's putting out there in the world, and it's him working through his own ideas. It's him working through his own thoughts. And are those going to be perfectly acceptable and everyone is going to understand them? How could they possibly be when he doesn't understand them? When he's trying to work these things out himself, and yet it's like we judge artists that have faults in their understanding and then show us that. And it's like, well, but that's what art is. Like how can you fault an artist for showing you their flaws in their art? I mean, they're trying to, like they're trying to figure it out, and whether they do or not, a lot of times they don't. When not, like I mean, you look at, especially in horror, you look at whether it's Poe or whether it's Lovecraft or whether, you can name all sorts of different writers that failed to ever figure things out through their art, yet still created amazing art that we can all connect to. And I think it's this weird thing nowadays where everyone wants to condemn the artist's work because the artist is flawed.
Yes. So I have two thoughts about that. The first is that this kind of reminds me of like what we were talking about, earlier on, where like the stuff is complicated, right? Like it doesn't have to be coherent. There's no need for it to be coherent. Life is not coherent. We are not coherent. We are who we make choices, we do things. Coherence is not something that I think is necessarily us as human beings, or much less ideas or the history of them. But I think the other thing that I think is probably more salient is that it has to be both, right? It has to be both. You have to be able to say, yes, this is super fucked up. Yes, this person said fucked up, horrible things. Yes, this art also means something because it reflects a moment, a time, a people, an idea, a feeling, something like that, right? Like I love film noir, right? As a lot of our friends, love film noir. Film noir's got a lot of problems with women. It has to be both, right? Like I have to be able to acknowledge in one part of my brain to say like, yes, there's a problem here, but man, the way that this scene is shot is incredible. Or Robert Mitchum in this particular movie is so good that you can't stand it, right? Because it moves you in some way. It makes you feel something. It's poetry. I mean, it's, as you say, it's art, right? And I think that's kind of like the hard thing for a lot of people to figure out is like that it can be both. You can problematize stuff and criticize stuff without dismissing it or without trying to destroy it or end it. I mean, that's kind of what we all have to do, because there's not a one of us in this room that likes that, where everything we like is free from, say, white supremacy, right? Like it's just not, that's not real. That's not real life. White supremacy infects all of our existences right now, and we deal with it every day, in some ways more horrifically than others. We also all, I suspect, subscribe to Disney Plus. Now what are we going to do?
I mean, there's
True.
Some of these things are dominant cultural, like, yeah. I mean, you can't, you can't. If you were to eliminate everything that has the taint of white supremacy on it, like, I don't know what's left in culture, because our culture is white supremacy. In a certain way, is built around white males, like
Look at the screen right now.
Yeah.
Well, hey.
I mean, you just have to be willing to reckon with those things, right? You have to reckon with the ugliness and try to be better tomorrow for yourself, while acknowledging that there is this ugliness that persists.
Did Kevin Costner ever do anything offensive?
The mailman. That was pretty. Or the postman, whatever the hell that piece. Waterworld.
The mailman. Nice.
I liked Waterworld.
I did too, actually.
I was a kid. It was fine. Whatever.
Yeah, I kind of like Waterworld.
That crazy Dennis Hopper in it. What are you gonna do? It was long. It was long.
I'm gonna wrap things up with this one question.
Waterworld.
Thank you so much for your time, and we absolutely want to have you back on. I think maybe at the end of the series, maybe we can get you and Tom King back to talk about this, which I think would be fascinating. I think that would be fantastic. So
face to face.
I want to leave you first with, once again, tell us about the book. So go when and where can we get your book?
So this is we're doing this in November, so it's right now in the November previews catalog. The book is called Mysterious Travelers. You can order it from the University of Mississippi Press website. You can get it through Amazon. But if you are a comic shop user, you can order it from your LCS in the month of November. If you buy comics from our friends at either Challengers or Discount Comic Book Service, there's a free signed and numbered book plate that will come with the book for you. And those are the ways you get it. It releases in February of 2021. Sal's pulled up the screen there where you can see the pre-order price for a hardcover. Don't buy the hardcover. No one buy the hardcover.
Way to sell it, Zach.
Well, they're $99, right? That's academic hardcovers are if you want to buy it, if you really feel compelled to buy the hardcover, go right ahead. But those are really meant for like libraries. That's why that's part of the reason the price point is so high. So just buy the paperback, save yourself some money.
I'm gonna wait for the artist edition. The absolute mysterious
travelers.
One of the great joys of my life was looking in the previews catalog and seeing my name and then art by Steve Ditko, and I was like, well, I mean, that's not untrue.
Yeah,
so
it's true-ish.
It's true-ish.
Yeah, it's true. True-ish. The art in the book is by him.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's the book. It's Mysterious Travelers. It comes out in February next year, and I hope that it provokes discussion.
All right. And second question, is there ever going to be a Zach Crucy, Craig Yo, like cage match for like preeminent Ditko historical master?
Oh,
a Ditko fight.
Well, I mean, that would be great. I mean, Craig did take Ditko to meet Jim Henson, so and like facilitate that. So I mean, I feel like I'm already. Like, I'm not sure I can punch that high.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that you can't take out Craig Yo.
No.
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't try. I mean, I feel like that would, there's not too many of us maniacs. So why eat our own?
Do the Ditko people into Ditko? Do you have like a name like Parent Heads or like
Dicks?
Dick.
Yeah, we all. Yes, we do. And just like Parrot Heads, we all love Corona and
cheeseburgers.
And, cheeseburgers and really any beer that you can put a fruit in. If it's a beer and you can put a fruit in it, we're for it. And that's how we honor his memory and his legacy. And we take pilgrimages to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, the preeminent beach capital of the world, and sort of chill there by the Cambria Steel Company in our beachwear.
Nice, that's awesome. And you met him. You've actually met him.
I did. And he was very sweet to me. He had no reason to be. And he was not happy to see me at first because I was a maniac beating on his door in the middle of a work day. But after a couple minutes, he was very sweet to me and kind and shared his time when he didn't have to. That was a good day. That was a very good day.
I remember.
I cried.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Zach, we miss you. It's so awesome to see you. And seriously, once this series is over, I want to see if we can get you and Tom on to talk about this, and we'll see where his story goes, which we have no idea where it's going, but I think that might be something really cool to get together. And I love you, brother. It's good to see you.
Man, good to see you all. And that would be great. I would love it. So,
All right.
But anyway, thank you guys for having me on too, and let me talk about my obsessions.
All right. And so I'm going to order the book, but not the hardcover.
Yeah, don't buy the hardcover. Nobody buy the hardcover
unless you're a library.
Just tank my sales numbers on this. Just 0.
All right. Thank you, Zach.
All right, bye guys.
Bye.
There you
All
go.
right.
The amazing Zach Crucy. One of my favorite people.
Dr. Zach.
Dr. Zach. Just like seriously one of my favorite people in the world. Just
He's
such
a dicko doctor.
When he comes back, I have to tell the story with him. Well, I have to ask him if it's okay to tell the story, but and it's a story about him and a phone call he made to me one night after a long conversation. But I'm not going to tell it now, but because I want to make sure it's okay with him if I tell the story. But when he comes back, we'll see if it's okay if I tell that story. Because
I seriously want to get him and Tom on an episode to talk about this. I think that, I just want to sit back and listen to them, which I think would be awesome.
Yeah, I'm sure we can. I'm sure Tom would be into that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But what we have to talk about now is our trade talks. Do you have?
Yes,
yes.
Oh wait, I have a bumper. Hold it, here it is.
You got a bumper. That's very TED Talks. I like it.
Well, that was yes. It was TED Talks, Trade Talks. Yeah,
Trade Talks.
Trade Talks. Dun, dun.
Talk trade.
So this Trade Talks is brought to you by Tom.
Yep. Prez.
Take the floor, sir.
Prez came out in 2015, which seems like about 800 years ago. It's by Mark Russell.
Hadn't won the World Series.
There was an election happening. It
was a joke of an election coming up.
Yeah,
foregone conclusion.
Yeah, and written by Mark Russell, there by Ben Caldwell and a few other artists. It was originally supposed to be 12 issues, but it got canceled after 6. And they had like a little wrap up thing then one of the issues. But yeah, it's Prez. And I don't know if any of you guys have ever read like the original Joe Simon Prez from back in the day.
I have not.
It is remarkably stays true to the spirit of that first one. And the spirit of that first one and of this one is, man, stuff's really fucked up. Like,
yeah,
stuff's really messed up. The people in charge are really messed up. It'd actually be pretty great if someone who didn't know what they were doing was in charge, as opposed to all the adults. Which, I remember reading the original Prez for the first time. You kind of assume it's going to be like a super goofy 70s book, which it has elements of that in there. But it is, like this one, a pretty harsh criticism of modern society, right?
So how stupid everything is.
Yeah, the plot to this is that people, in order to be elected president, you get elected on Twitter. So, but what happens is this girl becomes like a viral sensation because she accidentally fries her hair at her corn dog restaurant that she works at, and she becomes popular enough to like kind of sneak in. She steals enough electoral votes, like in Ohio, to sneak into being president. And then she sort of like builds a cabinet out of all these people who, none of the establishment political people would ever want to be involved with, and includes the original Prez, or at least a callback to the original president.
Yeah, it's a Rickard. It's Rickard.
And essentially the book, is amazingly prescient about many things.
For being 5 years ago, yeah.
But even just like the stuff about like the cat flu and like
Right.
the like
pandemic
idea of
pharmaceutical company.
Farmer Duke.
Well, I thought
boosting their own stocks with news about the releases of it, and I was like, holy shit. I was like, this book is like,
it's amazing. Fucking amazing. Well, the one thing you kind of you went over real quick was, you know, how she becomes president. I thought was so funny and brilliant was, you know, it was like the two parties were so busy trying to fuck each other over that they ended up fucking themselves over and allowing her to become president, which was just so genius. But yeah, there's so many things in this book that are just like, oh my God, is Mark Russell a fucking, you know,
prophet?
Yeah, like, oh my God, it's amazing. The things that you see in this book is just it's kind of scary.
Yes, I mean it's they jam a lot into those 6 issues, right? Almost to the detriment at times, where it's like
that would be my one. My one complaint is there's so many thoughts and so many. I mean, they're like he had pages of stuff that was just like one page was just sort of like a gag about something, you know, it was just one satirical take on another piece, you know, and it was almost too much. Like you said, it was just, you know, almost too much information, too many gags, too many thoughts.
Well, too many things to talk about. Drones and Guantanamo Bay and
one of the things that the first thing I took away from it is that we've become so inundated with comics being like serious, dark, violent, whatever. And the general populace thinks of comic books as being, you know, jokey, haha, you know, but as we read comics, there's just not a whole lot of humorous comics out there. This is a really, really funny book.
And I think
I caught myself laughing, like literally laughing out loud at a lot of the gags. It's a really funny book.
In a way, though, also funny, but far more relevant than many other comics that are attempting to be relevant through sort of a darkness or like a...
Well, it's dark humor. It's absolutely
it's because it's about how really like it is. It skewers society, like basically every aspect of modern society, while being funny at the same time. And I totally see why it wasn't popular because of that. Because it's like it's dense, it's funny,
really good,
it's harsh,
good.
And I could see people, you know, I think, you know, we've talked a lot about this like the last couple of months, is like comics that have like an ambition, you know, of like a viewpoint or like a point of view. And this book has an extremely strong point of view about how things are, right? And I think, you know, a challenge to a lot of people is like...
Not always nice to the left either.
No,
neither side.
Absolutely not.
It's because it's not strictly a left-right thing.
No.
It's about the people in charge, whoever they are, don't give a shit about you.
Well,
right?
it's not, but it's even more than that. It also lambasts society and you know, social media stardom, and just how fucking we don't give a shit. You know, how much, you know, we just let this shit happen. So it's not just politics, it's society as a whole that it fucking goes after, which I really appreciated the fact that it wasn't just a left-leaning or a right-leaning. It's all fucked up. And we're included in that. We're part of it.
It's all fucked up. Absolutely.
It's all messed up. And maybe someone who doesn't know what they're doing should be in charge, would be, you know.
That's the only thing. The only problem with that is, as I kept thinking, well, yeah, but we kind of had that with Jimmy Carter. Like Jimmy Carter was a sweetheart of a person, a really wonderful man, as kind and a really bad president because he had no fucking idea what he was doing, and neither did his cabinet, and they were way over their fucking heads. So that was the only
extremely accurately predicted. I gotta find that speech where the speech that they always talk about, like the one about the malaise, of America, is actually an incredibly prescient speech about everything that followed in America.
No, for sure.
I think the thing about the book, in a sense, is like what the character of President Ross, of Prez, is like. She is someone who is genuine and wants to help people, but also is smart. She's smarter than everyone gives her credit for, right? Like she's not the idiot that all the people in charge assume that she is, right? Like she gets over on them and figures things out and knows how to like handle stuff, but also her strength is in her genuineness as well, of like the idea of like, one of the things in the book that was really interesting, right, is like the idea of like, someone's like, well, what are you going to go into on a world apology tour? And she was like, yeah, might as well, like the idea of like,
that's a good idea.
That's a good idea. Like, maybe you should go around.
It's the idea that it's like, you know what? We've done some really kind of fucked up shit to people that we need to apologize for.
The general idea, right?
It shows
of apologies, of just like, we live in a time where like people don't know how to apologize for doing something wrong. Like, like the classic.
Because we're living in it right now, is that we have someone who can't admit that they lost.
Yeah. Well, it's like, it goes even more to like
winners and losers in this world. And you have to be able to admit when you didn't win. And I've been involved in athletics my entire life. From the time I was 6 years old, there are winners and losers.
Well, curling, really, we have to go.
We're gonna go there. We're gonna go there, right?
The classic.
I wouldn't
modern,
say it's athletics.
Like the classic modern apology, where someone is like,
"Sorry,
if anyone was offended, I certainly didn't intend." Like the parsing of your words to be like, I didn't really do anything wrong. You might have responded to it, poorly, right? Like we joked about this, about something else, about like the longer the apology, probably the less sincere of an apology it is. Like if you have to write like a 5-page apology, you probably are not doing it. You probably don't truly mean it. Like
I'm sorry.
Like, or just that, like it's a thing I struggle with my kids too, right? Of like, trying to teach my kids not to be assholes, right? But it's like, it's not sorry. It's like when my son like pushes over my daughter, and I'm like, go apologize to your sister, and he does the bare minimum. He'll be like, oh, I'm sorry. Like the words themselves are the absolution. Like Dad heard me say that phrase. That means like I have done my obligation, right? And I'm always like, no, apologize, like so that she feels better, like it's not about me. But
that's a never-ending battle, by the way. Like I still have to like, I have this constant thing of competition. My kids, well, it's mostly my daughter's very competitive, and it's always with her brother, even though he's not particularly competitive, but because he's the baby, there's an automatic sort of competitiveness, and it's always this thing of like, and anytime I talk to her about it, it's like she thinks I'm trying to make her feel bad, and it's like, no, I just want you to understand that what you did really made your brother feel bad. You know what I mean? Like it's not like I'm not trying to get back at you for it. I'm not trying to make
this isn't vigilante justice here. I'm not trying to punish you. I'm trying to tell you that what you did hurt somebody.
Right.
So you should think about what you did and like genuinely, and not just be like, I'm sorry. Like those words are magic.
It's a weird thing as a country though, like as a government,
yeah.
There's that weird thing of like, well, what country, I don't know. I have such a strange, like,
but just like we were just talking about with Dicko.
At what point did it become an evil to show empathy or any sort of weakness?
Well, yeah, I think that's the criticism of the entire society.
The
80s. I would say the 80s that started. That was a Reagan era.
Back it up. Isn't it okay to show emotional empathy? And that's where we have failed. And this comic addresses it. It's like, you know what? It's okay to go to someone that you have wronged and say, I'm sorry, you were wrong.
It's a little bit like Mr. A. I think, it's an idea, the idea of apologizing, or the idea of like, do you really feel bad, like, about what you've done? Like, whether it's person to person in the society, like whether it's like, do you personally, like, I don't know what example I would bring up, right? But like that idea, I think, of like apologizing, like why have we become so reticent to like apologize just on a personal level? Why can't people apologize? Like that's the thing that's bothered me for a long time about like
it's insecurity. It's
like
it shows weakness, and you don't want to people that are insecure can't show weakness. It's a pride, it's an ego driven thing. The thinking about this, like the difference between a politician and someone like who is in the Department of Justice, or someone that is is Secretary of State, or someone that works with the military, and the men and women that serve in the military that have actually, and obviously I'm talking in generalities, but I've found in my experience, like actual military people that have served in war are way more empathetic than politicians who've never served, because
they make a joke about that in the book. It's easy to gamble with somebody else's life,
right?
She
had the realization of that. It's like, and they're commending her for her choice, and it's like, well, it's easier to gamble with someone else's life.
But I think it comes down to it's insecurity. It's guys that have never. It's a bunch of like old white dudes that have never actually, fought or watched anyone die or bleed or bled for anything and suffered for anything.
What if they say something like, I always felt like I served in the military?
Those are the weakest fucking. Those are the guys. I mean, there's millions of them out there that are, pretending to be, military guys, pretending to have that, and I even know, and there's even military guys that are like that haven't actually seen, sort of the horrors of war, or haven't gone through that kind of thing. But I think if you ever talk to a combat veteran, for the most part, those guys are pretty empathetic. They're pretty, like, they've seen what this stuff does, and it's the same thing, like, like for the most part, like fighters, MMA, that kind of stuff. Those guys don't have the ego driving them. They've got, they don't have to try and prove anything. But you have some fucking jerk off politician who, has never fucking suffered, has never gone through anything. And I think, with this, going back to the book, with her wisdom comes from her suffering, her dealing with her father, and dealing with her hardships, and not having the resources to take care of her dying father. That gives her a certain perspective and a certain wisdom, I think, in this book. And I think that was important that they showed that about her, because I think that's the difference between a billionaire who, grew up rich and had everything given to them. And I'm not just talking about Donald Trump in this instance. There's lots of those guys in government now, unfortunately. and someone that actually has like faced adversity knows the difference, knows and can empathize with other people's plight. When you've never actually suffered for anything, you have no idea what that means, and you don't understand it. I think you just can't comprehend it. When you never have had to work for something, when you've never had to bust your ass, or you've never dealt with just bad fucking luck, and you've always been able to buy your way out of any problem, you can't even understand it, I think. And I think I'm almost empathetic to someone in that way, where it's like, I can understand why these guys are such assholes, because they don't even they can't even comprehend someone not being able to just float through life, because that's all they know, and I don't know, maybe I'm making it simplistic too, but I think that's part of the book too, of just like, she has suffered and dealt with and seen tragedy in these things, and she understands what's important in life. And you see, all these politicians and all these career corporate entities and people that she has to deal with all the time, that just they're almost cartoonish, and we see them in real life now, and it's like, how do these people exist? How are you like this? How are you possibly like this? How is it even fucking possible for you to have this sort of mentality? No regard for humanity, no regard for your fellow man. No, like how I think the three of us sitting here can't even comprehend that, can't even understand how someone else can behave like that. But I think it's just a complete lack of understanding of that without ever seeing it or dealing with it themselves. And two, it's just, I don't know. I lost my train of thought there, but
do we see any symbolism in her name of Beth Roth? I mean, is that a Betsy Roth?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I just want to know if Mark Russell or Ben Caldwell have any guesses for what'll happen in 5 years from now. So it's like, tell me.
Outlook is not positive.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Here's the funny thing, Tom, is like, you look at, and I did go back, I haven't read the comics, but I went back and I Wikipedia'd the original Prez series. You know who some of the original antagonists that Prez had to fight against in 1973, which was the year that I was born, so it's 47 years ago.
I mean, there's a bunch of senators. There's Boss Smiley.
Crazy militias.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
So 47 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, the original is really good, and it's not what you think it is. Because you probably, if you're like me, you assumed it's some sort of kind of goofy ass Bob Haney, weirdo 70s, people in the 70s talking like it's 1967, weird hippie stuff. But it's similar in that it's a pretty scathing view of society back then as well, of this is what the people in charge think of you, and this is what this is how they want things to work. So yeah, I think there's a collection of the original Prez somewhere. If you ever run across it, give it a read, because it's always surprising. It's always not exactly what you expect it to be.
Yeah, it's in one of the, that weird 70s DC.
Yeah, it got canceled after 4 issues. People don't want
political
satire.
They don't want political satire. No, DC tried it twice.
I mean, at that
did
point,
you guys
that only lived in Mad Magazine, right?
Did you guys ever read his Flintstones, Mark Russell's?
No.
Flintstones? It's supposed to be really good as well. I've never gotten around to it, but it's supposed to be similar in that it's very topical and relevant. I never thought I'd say that about the Flintstones.
We should actually talk about the art, because it's a
Ben Caldwell's art, awesome,
by the way.
It's beautiful. It's fun.
Yeah, I mean,
the robots look cool. That's always a bonus.
Tina is awesome. Let's talk about Tina for a second.
anytime you can get like a nice solid robot.
Carl,
design.
the end of life bear.
Yes, Carl, the end of life bear.
Would you like some marijuana?
Yeah, Carl, the end of life bear deserves his own one shot.
Carl, no.
You're in the wrong room. Carl, the end of life bear. Yeah, I mean,
sorry about that.
Yeah.
Oops.
But yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful book, very funny.
Yeah, I mean the
art. Great job.
I mean, what issue do they not tackle? I mean, if they're
literally ahead of its time in that if it came out now, I'd be like, dude, you guys are a little too on the nose.
Yeah,
with the pandemic stuff.
Well, here's
voted fraud, but I guess they did the whole Twitter thing, right?
Yeah. There was one page in particular that it was in the first issue that was really like chilling to me, and it was when she was in class and they're talking about the fall of the Roman Empire.
Isn't that a great scene?
And how, the Roman Empire was dead 40 years before anyone knew it. And I was like, oh my God, that's terrifying. Like that was chilling.
I wanted to bring that up. It's like, that could be a little too on topic.
That was chilling to read that and sort of, sit and go, well, are we already, is it already, regardless of what has happened in the last election, are we already
in 2036? Are we going to be like, yeah, you know what, 2016, that was kind of the end.
That was the end.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, and like I said, one of the things I really appreciated about this book was that it didn't just go after politicians or politics or the government, but it also society and just our sort of malaise, and that's the thing I keep like. So many people, like so many groups are patting themselves on the back about Biden winning and like handing Biden the win in Georgia and handing Biden the win here. And then it's like, okay, where the fuck were you in 2016? Like,
not 2016, 2010.
Well,
2010 is
but
where
my point
sideways.
My point is just, how about, it's like, how about, there was a tweet. There was a Ron Perlman, who he played Hellboy and the actor. He tweeted something the other day, and I rarely ever like reply to celebrities or anything like that on Twitter because it's like they're not going to fucking read my tweet. Yeah, but I did to him because he tweeted something of like we need to make sure this kind of bullshit never happens again. In regards to Trump, and it's like. I tweeted back to him like, it already exists. It's called go fucking vote. If people would go fucking vote, we never would have had this problem. We saw that. Quit patting yourselves on the back for voting in a fucking 78-year-old, probably mentally compromised guy that is the lesser of two evils because you didn't fucking show up for a woman 4 years ago. So quit fucking complimenting yourselves, you fucking assholes, and go vote every goddamn 4 years and every 2 years for your fucking congressman and everything else. I'm just tired of everybody patting themselves on the fucking back for doing what they should have fucking done in the first place.
Yeah, well, I mean, and this book definitely points out we get the government we deserve. It's pretty face forward with that. It does it in one of the more effective, satirical, ways that I've seen a comic, approach it in, the West. It's I mean, Russell has a lot of Remender in him, from Remender attacks a lot of stuff from a political, satirical point of view, and I felt the same thing in this.
Yeah, but Remender does it from a like teenage punk,
the straight edge
anarchist,
straight edge punk kind of. But Ross is kind of that character. She's kind of got that punk sensibility to her.
She looks like that character, but I don't think she really. I mean, I don't know. I don't think
softer than that.
Well, like I said, we talked about her wisdom. I think she has a certain wisdom. She doesn't just you know, she doesn't just go in there with some sort of like fuck you attitude. I mean, she definitely has that to a certain degree, but
it sets it up that her motivation comes from an amazing sense of loss because of her father.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But she's also like, she's aware enough to know what she doesn't know, which is like a rare thing for anyone in power to know what you don't know, you know.
And that's something that I'd actually like to see in the comic. She almost seems a little too wise for her years. I'd like to see a little bit of the like crazy. She's what, 19? Is she 19 in the comic?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, you won't see it because it ain't coming back. Until someone does
and that's what I would like to see.
Dude, this comic would kick ass now. Like a female-led political commentary, you know, sort of. I think this comic would do great at DC now, probably. Yeah, do a Kickstarter. It's a shame that a comic that was this good, and thank you, Tom, for picking it, because I probably never would have read this book.
Yeah.
If you hadn't have picked it, and I'm glad it did, because it's very good. I mean, it's a shame a book this good with this much of a perspective and this much of something to say did get canceled and can't exist, unfortunately, in mainstream comics, because we need more stuff, I think, like this in comics, and maybe one less Batman book, you know.
Yeah. Yes.
Agreed.
We need more Bat books. Always
more Batman books.
Please, more.
But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was terrific. Yeah, I mean, like I said, if there's anything that to complain about, is that there's just too many fucking. It's too many ideas, and I don't want to face that many realities about society.
There were still more things that they could have gone into.
Yes.
There always seems to be, right? Like,
they touched on climate change. They touched on, you know, it's gun control and campaign finance reform, and, you know, the move to an oligarchy. I mean, they touched on a lot of stuff. It was,
like I said, I mean, there were pages that were like, just one page was like a whole thing you could have done a book on. You know, and it just touched on it and moved on to something, you know, moved on to the next thing.
But what they were able to do is never lose the humanity of the book. I mean, you were grounded to her as the anchor point that you were able to, you know, to stay with the book. And that's what it comes back to, is we all have our ideologies, but at some point it has to be grounded in humanity. And she's that anchor point, right?
Well, I mean, she's us. You know what I mean? Like she's not special.
But the thing is, she's not us. She's us. But there are too many. What I'm realizing, there's too many other people that she is not them. That they would hate that character.
I don't know. I mean, I think there are a lot of those people that are just as sick of politics on both. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's, once again, the lesser of two evils in a lot of people's minds. I don't think everyone that votes for, like, all 70 million people that voted for Donald Trump are fanatic, you know, believers in what he is.
They are.
I think,
no, they are.
I don't think they are.
They're absolute fucking insane baboons, and you can't.
Well,
you cannot fucking.
All right, guys, listen.
With them. No, they're insane. They're insane, and they're cultists, and you can't debate with them. They're off the goddamn rails.
Just because your friends on your curling club are that way doesn't mean everyone is, Chris.
We're gonna stop making that joke, but no, there is a cultist aspect to this, that there are millions of people that think that this election was stolen, and that's wrong. And so, no, there
are there millions? How do you know that? How do you know that there are millions of people that believe that?
You don't think that there are millions of people out of the 74 million people that voted for him? You don't.
I have no idea. I have no idea. I can't possibly.
Stolen.
I could not. There's no way I
Tom's
could.
Going away.
There's no way for me to possibly answer that in any realistic way.
Yeah.
How could you answer that question? There's no way.
Wrap it up, guys. This wasn't my intention with the Prez pick. Wrap it up.
You suggested a political comment.
Wrap it up.
All right. So, Sal, what is your pick for our next comic to talk? Our next trade talk.
Well, first of all, if we're going to talk trade talks.
Trade Talks.
I'm going to keep the political theme rolling, and I'm going to go Transmetropolitan Volume 1.
All right.
Really? Okay.
Well, we talked about like maybe that's something we should re-examine, and it's been a long time since I've read it, and I'm hoping to have like a fresh perspective with it. So I think, let's keep the political, theme. I mean, it's definitely a political book. A little different.
I'll double down. I'll tell people read Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas as a supplemental along the way.
Yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily the best.
You just have to read one. Let's not make it more complicated.
Yeah, I'm just throwing some extra Hunter S. in there to mix it in, because we're gonna end up talking about Hunter S. Thompson.
I think I'd read Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, 76.
Okay. Yeah, that's a better book. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. I like them both.
But yeah, so Transmet Volume 1 by Warren Ellis.
Mm-hmm.
And Derek Robertson? I can't remember the artist. Absolutely. Yeah, Derek Robertson, right?
Yep.
So that should be fun. I haven't read it in a while, so I'm looking forward to.
When did that? I mean, that's early 2000s. Yeah.
I don't even know. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Is that a Vertigo book?
Probably. I don't know. I don't have this information in front of me, man.
Yeah, I think that was
1997.
Wow.
Clinton was in office, right? Was that Clinton, or was that George W. at that point?
No, it's Clinton.
Ran from 1997 to 2002.
It was a long run. There's a bunch of trades, and it's going to be a little weird to just read the first trade because it goes on. Well, and it's not. I don't know that was necessarily written for trade, so I don't know if 6 issues, the first trade, like. I think it is a comprehensive story in and of itself, from what I remember.
Yeah,
but it may not be because it's that's a long series.
Yeah. I would definitely suggest to people that have never been exposed to Transmet, definitely do a little background research on Hunter S. Thompson.
I don't think you have to. I mean, it's obviously inspired.
I think it adds to the experience.
Guys, let's wrap it up. We're arguing.
I'm trying to go to bed. All right, guys. Very interesting, thought-provoking episode. Loved having Zach Crucy on. Check out his book. Tom, thank you for suggesting Prez. We all enjoyed it. We'll be back again next Tuesday. Check out Transmet. We'll be talking about that in the next 3 weeks.
Join the
God, we have a listener email.
Oh, I do have a listener email, but also join our Amazon book club if you want to keep track of what we're talking about with Trade Talks. I set up an Amazon book club. It's free. If you have an Amazon account, you can join it. And all it is just basically it'll show you what our current pick is. It'll show you our past picks, and you can also suggest books. So there's nothing involved as far as like paying for anything. You can buy the books obviously on Amazon if you want. You don't have to, but it's a free book club. I just tweeted out the link. I put it on Facebook and Twitter today. So go look at our Twitter account or our Facebook account if you want the link. But yeah, join up, and that way you can just kind of follow along with what books we're looking at for Trade Talks. And yes, listener email. I have a listener email. Hold on, let me just pull this up real quick. Where is it? All right, this is from Wes A. And he said, "Hi guys, recently been watching your live streams on YouTube and loving them. After the last Star Trek episode, I tried thinking of a good recent Star Trek comic recommendation for Sal. The Kevin/JJ timeline IDW comic that Mike Johnson wrote was overall pretty good. It ran for 60 issues with a mix of done in ones and what?
Oh, 60 issues. That's a long run.
Yeah, it's a good run. 60 issues with a mix of done in ones and multi-issue arcs. It took some plots and threads from the original series and put them in Kelvin timeline. If you want some Next Generation comics, the only ones that have really come out so far have been the 3 Mirror Universe mini-series from IDW, starting with Broken Mirror. Not sure if any of these are on Hoopla, but if so, I'd recommend giving them a shot. Thanks for the weekly shows. They're a great reprieve from the daily hellscape that we're all living in. Hope you guys are doing well. Wes."
Thanks, Wes.
Yeah, thank you, Wes. I appreciate the recommendation. That's great. I'm going to check those out. I'm slowly, my son and I are still slowly working our ways through.
How you liking it? Digging it?
I like it. I go back and forth with it. Like, I think they've done a really nice job of combining the J.J. Abrams like look and feel, so it's cool looking and very slick, with just enough like silliness of the original series. Like there's just enough cheesiness to it to kind of like, you know,
very optimistic.
It is very optimistic. That's fine. I have nothing, but it also is just sort of like, actually that is a very good, it's optimistic. Like when the one episode where what's his name? Harry Mudd came back, and the ending of that where it's just sort of like, oh, we're not going to punish this guy. He's just going to go off and sort of, and it was just like, wow, that was very original series Star Trek. That was very Star Trek. And it's just such an odd, it just is so out of place in today's sensibilities of television.
Yeah.
But it's a good combination, I think, of those things where it looks amazing. I mean, the show, they've really done a great job with how it looks, but
it's very immersive. It's immersive.
Yes, and but it does definitely have the Gene Roddenberry sensibilities, I think, to it. And also, but you get to see like interesting new things like Klingon nipples. That was interesting. That was something new. I'm not sure I needed to see that, but you know, I'm kind of attracted to a Klingon now. I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about it. It was
but here's the thing. It actually keeps getting better. So
oh god, all right.
Yeah, it's a great series. I adore it. You'll enjoy it. It keeps getting better. Tom, any comment on Klingon nipples? Are we ready to go?
Yeah, it's good.
Tom's been done for 40 minutes.
I've been done for like 20 minutes.
We have to be careful with Tom. He's a commodity.
Yeah.
All right. Well, folks, keep watching Discovery. Check out Transmet. Read your weekly books. And then come back next Tuesday.
Take your vitamins, brush your teeth.
Yeah, it's good. Wear deodorant. It's all good. You know, we can't go feral in these times. These, you know, these very, important, trying times that we're all going through, and we're gonna get through them together, right?
I'm officially out of quarantine. I'm officially out of quarantine in 2 days.
I'm not. I got 2 more days to go.
Good luck, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you get the world we live in? In the meantime,
in between time,
we're gonna be everywhere. In
head around. Come on, nipples. Tom didn't want to cheer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He's out. There we go.
I'll tell you. You got to finish it.
Comics.